Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is resumes today, and all of you have turned in your internship resume, and I appreciate that. The reason we kind of do this, it may seem like reverse order to you guys, but the reason I do it this way, and I've actually heard input from students that it works better this way, is I want you to see what it's like to put together a resume, how you think it should look best, and then see my tips and pointers and actually have your resume in front of you so that you can make some notes and see how things are different and experience that difference so that you can make changes and know how to make your resume better from now on. So that's the reason we kind of do it in this order. So thank you all for turning in your resumes and your cover letters. I have looked through them, and there's not one of them that doesn't need a little bit of updating or brushing up. So everyone, make sure you've got your resume in front of you so that you can make some changes and think about some things as I go along. I'll start off with the caveat that there is no such thing as a perfect resume. So everybody's resume is going to be a little different. There's no one way to do one. What you want to make sure that your resume does, make sure that it's clear, that it's concise, and that it's easy to read. A few pointers I want to give you: your font size. I tell students this all the time. Old people read resumes. Don't make your font size too small because they won't be able to read it. And if they're annoyed with reading your resume, what's the likelihood that they're going to give you an interview? So on your resume, you don't want your font to be too big. You also don't want it to be too small. Don't go any smaller than an 11-point font. That's kind of my rule of thumb. Also, you don't want to go crazy with bullets and numbering and lines and bold. Stick to a couple of formatting things. Maybe you bold your headings and you indent your words and your paragraphs. That's enough. You don't have to do a bullet and a line for everything. You don't have to do a lot of italics and underlining. Try to keep it simple because you want it to be easy to read. And if it's well organized, you won't need all of those bullets and formatting things. You never use I on a resume. A lot of you in your descriptions of the work you're doing, you'll say, I was in charge of this, or I was responsible of that. Just take the I out and say responsibilities were, or managed this. You want to think of it almost, what I tell students a lot is, it's like a headline for a newspaper. So think about the headlines in a newspaper. You never see a big long sentence. It's always just right to the point. What did you do? Managed 4 employees, responsible for cash deposits, whatever it is you're going to say. Use those short snippets, those headline formats, and that'll really help you get the most out of the space allowed on your resume. Chronological order is important, especially now since you're students. As you get longer into your career, it's not as important, but right now with the smaller resume you probably have as a student, chronological order is important. So you always start with the most recent thing you have done and go back into the past. So right now, since all of you are doing internships, the most recent thing on your resume is going to be this current internship that you're holding. So that's going to be the first thing, and then you'll go back in time from there. The same thing goes for your education section, your skills section. Start with your most current. So in your education section, Hendrix is always going to be listed first until you go to graduate school, and then you'll put that on there. So reverse chronological order is the rule of thumb for resumes. The last thing just to keep in mind as you're putting together your resume is the 10-second rule, and it's just something I made up. But put yourself in the interviewer's shoes or the employer's shoes. If they have 100 resumes to look through, what are the chances they're going to spend more than about 10 seconds to make that initial decision on your resume? So time yourself. After you've got your resume where you think it looks great, set a timer, read for 10 seconds, and see how far you get when the timer goes off. Any of your really important information, anything that's pertinent to the job you're applying for, needs to be above that line, basically. So, and that's also kind of the reason that we want students to have a one-page resume. Again, if you're going through hundreds of resumes, what are the chances you are going to flip to a second page? It's really important, especially being in college with the limited experiences you've had in the professional world. You really need to keep it to one page, unless you're working on a curriculum vitae, which is a whole nother ball of wax, and I can talk to you about that one-on-one in my office. So what should you include on a resume? That's a question a lot of students have, and a lot of students leave out a lot of really good information because they think, oh, I only have to list jobs that I have been paid money for, jobs that I've held for a certain amount of time, those kind of things. So here are the kind of things, especially as a college student, you can list on your resume. Professional skills, right? So obviously any professional jobs you have held, but also think about your Odyssey experiences. A lot of students leave those off, and those are great experiences to list on a resume. If you've done undergraduate research for a summer, if you've worked on a volunteer project for a sustained amount of time, those kind of things are very important to list on your resume, and you want to make sure they're on there in some manner. Also, you want to think about things that really will stand out to the employer. A lot of students have a misconception that you do one resume and you turn that resume into every job you apply for. That's definitely not the case. If you're applying for a business accounting type job, you want to highlight the business accounting experiences you've had. So on that resume, you might list, the business club here, or if you did the entrepreneurial studies program and you went to the Reynolds Cup, those type of things you're going to want to list, whereas some other things might fall off. But let's say you're the same student and you're applying for a job at a nonprofit, then you're going to want to highlight volunteer service that you've done. Maybe you've done an Odyssey project in the volunteer realm, those type of things. So you can definitely highlight different things on resumes that you turn in. So what you want to think about on your resume is, what is this employer going to be interested in? What can I put on my resume, A, that will show I'm extremely qualified, but B, might show that I'm a little different or might make me stand out from the other candidates? That's the mindset you want to use when you're putting together your resume. And you want to prove it. So don't just say, I worked here from August to June. What you want to say is, list that and then tell them the work that you did. Tell them the experiences that you have. Every listing on your resume should have some sort of explanation. So even if you were a cashier at Walmart, you're going to write on there, responsible for great customer service, handling cash deposits, those type of things. You should always have an explanation. You always need to prove it, is what I say. Things not to include in your resume. This may seem silly, but I see it all the time. This is why I'm telling you about it. Grammatical and spelling errors. Please, please, please. Resumes are in weird formats. Word is not going to catch spelling errors because it's not sentence formats. You need to thoroughly review your resume on paper, print it out, and look at it with a fine-tooth comb. Don't rely on spell checker. Give your resume to a friend, especially if you've been working on your resume for a couple of weeks. You're not going to see the forest for the trees. Send it to a friend. Let your mom and dad look over it. Bring it to Career Services. Let a second set of eyes look it over, because we'll catch mistakes like that you may not catch because you've been looking at it so long. So please, that is the #1 thing that will make an employer put your resume in the trash can, is if it has a grammatical error or a spelling error. Things also that don't belong on a resume, test scores. A lot of students will put their ACT scores or their GRE scores. Unless it's specifically requested in the application that you're sending in, you don't need test scores of any kind on there. GPA is definitely okay in your education section, but you don't need the test scores. You also don't need to list scholarships you received unless they're prestigious national scholarships, like a Fulbright Fellowship, a Rhodes Scholarship, a Truman, a Watson, things like that. Definitely go on a resume. But the Arkansas Academic Challenge Scholarship, the Trustee Scholarship at Hendrix, not so much, because it doesn't really mean a lot to anybody outside of Hendrix. They don't know what a Trustee Scholarship is. So you definitely don't need to include personal information. Your age should never be on your resume, your marital status or any other type of status, your gender, those type of things legally are not supposed to be on your resume. When you're going in and interviewing, folks cannot ask you how old you are. They cannot ask you if you're married or not. They can't ask you if you have kids. Those are all highly illegal things to ask. So don't put them on your resume. And most people can figure out from your graduation date or the types of activities that you're in these things anyway. So don't need to put that on there. I've seen students put their weight and their height on there. You don't need that information. You don't need your social security number. None of that goes on your resume. This is kind of tricky, and this is where students get a little frustrated with the resume process. Your high school information, unless you're a freshman really, your high school information does not belong on your resume. And what I mean by that is things like you were in the beta club or you were in the band, those type of things. Those really start to go away after you're in college. College is kind of the beginning of your professional resume life. So think about, maybe you have 1 or 2 highlights from high school and you can include that in the education section, and I'll show you an example of that next. But things like Beta Club, National Honor Society, especially in a place like Hendrix, everybody did that. So you want to really reserve space on your resume for whiz-bang, hot dog things that you've done, not something that everybody's done. So I'll show you an example in just a little bit. You don't have to include your supervisor's name in your descriptions. A lot of students will say, worked at McDonald's, my supervisor was John Doe. You don't have to list that information. What you'll do is in your references, you'll list John Doe and say that he was your supervisor at McDonald's. So you don't have to list it again in your work experience. It'll save you some room, which is good since you only have a page to work with. You also don't need full sentences. Again, think of that headlining format. We want to save space. If we've only got one page to work with, we want to make sure every word counts. So you don't need long, drawn-out sentences to explain the work you did. Think of that headline format, using those good, strong action words, and really make it concise and quick. And you also don't need words like job duties or I did or my responsibilities word. That just takes up time and space. You just want to stick to the basics, stick to the action words, and really get across the strength of what you've done. So here is an example of a good start to a resume. And a lot of students have the problem in that you're at Hendrix, but you also have a home address. So which address do you put on your resume? This is a great example of how to do both, so that if they're contacting you during the semester, they have your mailing address. If they need to contact you over a break or over summer, they've got your home address. I also think that this format is nice because it lets them see where you're from, especially if you are, from outside of Arkansas and you're going home from the summer. People love to hire hometown kids. So having your hometown on there sometimes can be an icebreaker. Interviewers will see that and say, oh, my aunt lives in Harrison or wherever. So I think it's great for folks to know where you're from. And this is a nice way to list it that does not take up a lot of space. Also, you'll see underneath your name, notice that your name is in the biggest font. You want that to stand out, and it is okay to have it closer to the top of the page than a 1-inch margin, especially if you're squeezing things in. So, but notice that the phone number and the email are under your name because those follow you around. Your cell phone and your email, regardless of if you're at home or if you're at school, that's always going to follow you around. So you just have to list it once. And then your address information. Since you're in college, your education section should always be the first thing at the top of your resume. If you tuck it in at the end, people are going to think you're trying to hide something. They're used to seeing the education at the top. That's where it needs to be. And like I said, reverse chronological order, so you'll list Hendrix first and then you'll list your high school. I do think it is okay to list your high school, where you went to high school, your GPA if you want to, if you're valedictorian or something like that. This is about the only place that we want to see high school information. So you can pick out a couple of highlights. Like on my example here, it says valedictorian, school-wide math award winner, football letterman. Pick 3 whiz-bang things and you can put them on there. That's about it. You really don't want to clog up your resume with a bunch of high school stuff. What's important now is what you're doing now at Hendrix. Also, make sure that folks, if you have declared a major, make sure that's on there underneath your education section. They want to see what types of things you're studying. If you haven't declared a major, that's okay. You can just list Hendrix as your current place of enrollment. A lot of students will study abroad, and this is the place that you would put what school you attended when you studied abroad. So Hendrix will still come first, but then after Hendrix, you'll put, Graz University or wherever you were, and you'll want to definitely list the city and the country. And what I've seen students do underneath that, just like under Hendrix we have Bachelor of Arts, under high school we have that little byline. What you can do underneath your study abroad experience is you can list a few of the classes you took, or you can say exposure to British art and film, or you can give a little synopsis there of the types of things you studied, especially if it's applicable to the job you're applying for. It'll be nice for folks to see that you've had some experiences outside of the United States in those areas. So you would list it just like you do here, put the dates on there. You won't have a GPA obviously, but definitely the education section is where you'll want to list that. And then I'm just going to show you some examples of well laid out resumes and what I'm talking about as far as sections and formatting, that kind of thing. So this next resume is a good example of how to highlight things you've done here at Hendrix that may not have been jobs per se, but definitely apply to what you're applying for. So this person is applying for a job at Stevens, which is an international bank, big business place in Little Rock. And so they're mentioning a lot of their business experience here in the education section because they don't want to list it down in the professional experience. They've got some great internships and things they've done there. So if you look in their education section, you can see they even list a class and kind of put different bullet points under a class that they took because it's very relevant to the job they're applying for. This person was applying to be a portfolio manager at Stevens. So you can see they're using the same language, they're putting in that information, even though it was a class that they took. This is from a student that went to SMU. They're really hammering home that they've got that great experience through working in the classroom setting. So you can expand your education section a little bit if it is directly going to relate to what you're applying for. And this is an excellent example of a well laid out resume. There is a lot of information in here, but it's still just one page. So as far as sections and headings go, there's no right or wrong way. You obviously want to have an education section and you want to have a professional experience section. But beyond that, you can combine sections together. You know, a lot of students may have one volunteer experience, they have one leadership experience, and so it looks kind of funny to have all these headings with just one thing underneath it. So feel free to combine sections if that works for you. You can have a leadership and volunteer experience section, or you can have an awards and skills section, or you can have a publication, presentations, and membership section. You can combine these if you need to. Make it work for you. These are just a list of options, and if you come up with other options, I'm sure that'll be great too. So, particularly for those of you applying to graduate school or more academic fields, the related coursework and experience section can be a good section for you. A lot of places will want to know if you've had ecology or chemistry or things like that. So this is just kind of a good general list of the possible sections that you could have on there. And looking at this list may help you remember some things that you don't have on your resume that you'd like to put on there. So look through these sections and see what applies to how you'd like to lay out your resume. All resumes need references. Some will ask for it on the application specifically, so if you've already filled out that information, you don't have to put it on your resume, but you always want to make note that you do have references available. And for Hendrix students, we kind of go with 3. You need a minimum of 3. You need an academic reference. This is a professor who knows you well and can speak to your intellectual capacities. So when folks call an academic reference, they want to know, are you a quick learner? Can you put a sentence together? Do you write well? Do you speak well? Are you interactive and engaging? That's the kind of questions they're going to ask your academic reference. So make sure you've got a good academic reference lined up. You need a professional reference, someone you've worked with. That can be someone here at Hendrix, especially if you're a student worker, that kind of thing. But someone that can speak to your professional abilities. Are you on time? Are you responsible? Do they trust you? Are you a good teammate? Those type of things. Employers want to know that, and that's what they're calling references for. And then your third reference is a bonus reference. This could be another faculty member, maybe it's your academic advisor. This can be a coach, this can be one of your pastors, this can be someone that can just attest to you as a person, right? So, yes, she's great to get along with, or he's the hardest worker I've ever met. Those kind of things. They're going to speak to your character, your ability to get along with others. That's what you want your bonus reference to serve as. And as far as listing references on your resume, you don't have to put the snail mail address anymore. So just list an email, a phone number. You want to list their name, obviously, and then their title and organization. That's how they'll relate to you. And this is what I was referring to earlier. You don't have to put your boss's name on there because you're going to put that down in the reference section, and they'll see how it ties in. So make sure that you do have your references, and definitely make sure to be good stewards with your references. Don't spring into your faculty member's office and say, I have a job interview tomorrow. They might call you. Can you be my reference? You want to keep in touch with these people. Make sure they're lined up ahead of time. And definitely, as you're applying to places, it is okay to send an email or to call your references and say, hey, I've just applied for a job at so-and-so, so you might be hearing from them. Thanks again for serving as a reference for me. Here's a copy of my resume, just in case you want to have it on file. Keep in touch with your references because that will help them provide a better reference for you. Here's an example of how to list references along the bottom of your resume so that they don't take up a lot of space. You can definitely use that horizontal space at the bottom margin of your resume. And here's a good example of listing name, title, organization, phone number, email. This is a great format down at the bottom for your resume references. Also, I wanted to show you this as an example. This is a student who's never had a real job, but she's done a lot of great things at Hendrix. And so this is she's got a full page of excellent qualifications for any job she would apply for, even though she's never really had a real job. So think about things you've been involved in. She's done undergraduate research. She's a student ambassador with the Office of Admissions. She's done Campus Kitty and those type of things. So, just because you may have never had a real job doesn't mean you don't have qualifications that employers want to see. So this is a great example of a student that has made the most of her resume, even though she may not have had a real job. Again, this is just another example of how to lay things out. A lot of times students, if you don't want to say professional experience, you can just list experience. And underneath that, you can lump together your professional or job experiences, your leadership experiences, and that type of thing. And so that's what this student has done. You'll see in his experience section, he's listed an internship that he's done, but he's also listed a leadership position in a fraternity and a few other things like that. So, some volunteer work he did with the Lupus Research Foundation. All of that's lumped together under experience. Not all of that is professional work experience, but it's definitely experience that has added to why someone would want to hire this student. Here's another example. A lot of students ask, do I need to have a profile or an objective at the top of my resume? It depends. If you're submitting a cover letter or a full application where you've written some things about yourself, I don't think you need a profile or an objective section. If you are just handing a resume to someone, let's say you've been networking and someone says, give me a copy of your resume and I'll hand it out to some friends, and so the resume is the only thing people are seeing, then you do need a profile or an objective section. And again, this would be in that headline format, not full complete sentences, but good, strong action words. And so this student has done a good job of listing that under their profile, and you can do the same. The other thing I wanted to show you, again, this person listed just a general experience category, and underneath there she lists an internship, she lists her sports participation here at Hendrix, and an Odyssey project. All of that can definitely be experience and can be lumped together. If you've only got one thing in each of those categories, lump them together, they'll have a little more impact. So don't be afraid to list those Odyssey experiences. That's why we make you go out and do them, so that you can come back and have good experiences when you apply to graduate school and out into the real world. And definitely for you athletes out there, please list your athletic experience. Employers love to hire athletes. It shows great time commitment. You've got a good balance. You know how to be leaders. You know how to be team players. So don't be afraid to list your athletic experience, especially if you're a 4-year letterman or something along those lines. That also shows loyalty and dedication, and employers really like to see that. So definitely make sure that you list your intercollegiate athletic experience, and also try to think of any awards or honors you may have gotten, whether it's the conference honor roll, which a lot of our students are on and just kind of bypass it because they think it's not important, but that's important to an employer. But also if you were the conference player of the week, or you got a designated team award at the end of the semester or year, voted on by your teammates and coaches, those kind of things look nice on a resume. I wanted to show you this. A lot of students will come into my office and we'll talk about their past experiences, and they'll say, oh, well, I worked at McDonald's for 4 summers, but I don't really think I want to put that on my resume. That's not worthy. That's definitely worthy, especially if you have had a prolonged summer job. What that says to an employer is that you're likable, you're well-informed, you're a good worker, because every summer they don't have to keep hiring you back. If you work one summer and you're terrible, what are the likelihood they're going to hire you again? Not much. But if you've gone back every summer back home and worked in the same place, that shows a lot about you, because those folks continue to want you to come back and work for them. So you want to list experiences like that. And don't think that working at McDonald's or Old Navy or any of those type places are going to demean your resume in any way. That's not true, especially if you have had a sustained track there, or if you've had a promotion track there. You started as, a shirt folder and now you're up to the cash register, or you started at the bottom and now you're a manager. You definitely want to show that growth and that experience and that long-term employability, regardless of where it is. So this resume is a great example of that. This student worked in the street department, basically filling potholes all summer. But look at what a strong description that he's shown. So he had 3 workers that he supervised. He did a lot of different tasks, and he showed some proof. So remember at the beginning I said you need to list things that you've done, but you need to prove it. Prove what you've done. The work that you've done is good work. And so instead of just saying I filled potholes, look at the great description he's put on there. And he says, we significantly increased the number of work orders completed. So that shows that this student can organize people, he can manage people, and he can get work done. What employer doesn't want someone like that? Also, here's a good example. This person worked at Abercrombie & Fitch. So yes, everybody knows what you do when we work at Abercrombie & Fitch, right? But also, towards the end, he got to train new employees, and he was also commended as a top employee, which means he was probably Employee of the Month or something like that. So make that as strong as you can. Use those good, strong action words and show people that the work that you've done is good, positive work, regardless of where it is. The last thing I wanted to show you, a lot of students will do the same kind of work at several different places. So for example, this student was a pharmacy technician. a lot of different pharmacies, you know, different summers, that kind of thing. So you can lump those together. And what that shows is that, you know, you do have good qualifications and you are able to hold a good job at a lot of different types of places. So this student was a pharmacy technician in different towns and different pharmacies based on where she was living, but that's good experience to list. And when you lump it together like that, it has good impact. So, so instead of listing 3 different employment sites and saying pharmacy technician under each of those, she could condense and save a little space and say, I was a pharmacy technician and here are the 3 places I worked. So if you've got some experiences like that, you can combine them together, and this is a great example of how to do that. That's the end of my example. So the main thing to keep in mind for your resumes, you want it to be clear, you want it to be concise, 1 page. You really don't want to go over 1 page unless it's just impossible. Come to our office, let us help you. We've got some formatting tricks we can work on. We can definitely help you get it down to 1 page. And also just remember to have those good, strong action words in your summaries, and always summarize the jobs that you do so folks know what skills that you have and what strengths you can bring to their company. So again, if you have any questions about resumes, there are several people in our office that can help you. I'm Leigh Lassiter-Counts. I'm the internship coordinator. So if you're working on applying for an internship for your resumes, come see me. We also have Jamie Fodio in our office. She's the employment coordinator. So if you want to turn this internship into a job, she can help you focus your resume that way. And we also have Christy Coker, who's our director, and she can help with graduate school resumes in particular, personal statements, those kind of things. So please contact us in the Career Services office if you have any questions or you want us to look over your resumes. And I hope this is helpful with the resume you've turned in. Update that resume and really make it strong with these pointers.